Hey everyone, Omogonix here and welcome back to a brand new video here on the channel. So as most people who regularly watch my videos would most likely know, I've been using Godot since last year and it's become the main game engine that I use to make my games. In this video I wanted to talk about why I prefer Godot over Unity now, and no, I won't be talking about the runtime fee. Before you comment that the runtime fee is gone, yes, I already know that. I've talked about that in a few videos now. Before I do get started, I just do want to say that I don't think Unity is a bad engine at all. It's an amazing engine and there's many great games made in it. It's the engine that I used before switching to Godot, and just because I prefer Godot now, that doesn't mean that I think Unity engine is bad, because it's not. It's a great engine, and I have been thinking about making tutorials for it again soon when I can be bothered to download Unity again and try out one of the later versions, but I don't know when that would be. Overall, this video is very opinionated. I'm not trying to say that Godot is the best game engine or anything like that. I'm just talking about why it's my personal favourite over Unity now. Godot does have its pros and cons. There are ways in which Godot can improve, just as any other engine, but the pros definitely do outweigh the cons for me. Also, I have recently released a Christmas horror game on itch.io for free. Please go check it out if you have the time to, and maybe even give it a comment and rating. So with all that out of the way, let's now discuss why I prefer Godot over Unity. This first thing I'd like to talk about is file size. When downloading Godot, the file size is smaller than you think it would be. The zip file is usually around 50 megabytes depending on the version, and when extracting the contents from the zip file, it will be somewhere around 100 megabytes, again depending on your version, which is much smaller compared to other engines such as Unity and Unreal. When I first started using Godot, I thought the file size would be an indicator that perhaps Godot would be limited in a lot of ways. However, as I've continued to use Godot over the past year, the file size is no indicator for the engine's limitations at all, so don't let it fool you. Another cool thing to mention is that there is no installation process. When you download Godot from their website, all you need to do is unzip the zip folder, go into the project manager and create a new project, then boom, you're ready to go and start making games. There's no installation process that you need to wait for. It's just a simple download from the website, extracting the zip folder, and then the engine is available for you to use right away. This now leads into the next thing I'd like to talk about, and that's no signups. Godot doesn't require you to create something like a Godot account, so then you can use the engine. As I mentioned before, it's very straight out of the box, no installation process, and no sign up either. Godot is also completely free and open source. As you would most likely know, Unity has a free tier and pro tier subscription. They have other options too, but the two common ones I'd say are the free and pro tier. If you meet certain revenue requirements whilst using the free tier, you're then expected to upgrade to the pro subscription, so then you don't have a yearly revenue cap. The revenue cap for the personal edition as of recording this video is 200,000 USD per year, which is a very good limit that most developers, including myself, don't need to worry about. However, what I prefer with Godot is these sorts of restrictions don't exist at all. If your game makes more than 200,000 US dollars per year, you won't have to subscribe to a pro tier subscription. And by the way, I have nothing against Unity having a subscription based model. I think the way it works is fine. If you're using the free edition and you make 200k USD or more per year, subscribing to the pro tier should be well within your reach, depending on whatever expenses you might have in your life, and I think it also depends on how many people are in your team as well, since I'm pretty sure the Unity Pro subscription is per seat meaning person. As I mentioned before, Godot is also open source, meaning that the source code for the engine is freely available for anyone to modify and add on to as they wish. Overall, not only is Godot completely free to use, but it is also completely yours to do whatever you want with. You don't need to worry about any restrictions whatsoever. Next up, I'd like to talk about the UI. When I first started using Godot, I found it to be confusing at first. One of the reasons was because of how new everything was to me, including the UI of the engine. However, as I continued to use Godot more and more, and learn more over time, I actually prefer Godot's UI much more than Unity's now. Godot's UI feels more compact and things just feel easier to access. Of course, that's just my opinion, you may feel differently about that. Unity has a very user-friendly UI too in my opinion, but I didn't realise how much more I'd prefer Godot's. One thing which helped me get the hang of navigating Godot's UI and just learning the engine as a whole was my experience with Unity. If you've used a game engine like Unity or any other engine before and you change over to using something else like Godot or Unreal, there's a good chance you'll be able to learn that engine much quicker than if it were to be the first engine you had ever used. Of course, it all depends on the type of engine. If you go from using something like the RenPy visual novel engine to then using Unity, you'll most likely feel like someone who's using a game engine for the first time. But since Godot and Unity have a lot of similarities, that helped me get the hang of things much quicker, including the UI. So whilst I do prefer Godot's UI over Unity's now, I wouldn't have been able to learn as quickly if it weren't for my experience with Unity. Another thing I prefer with Godot as I've gotten more used to it is the node system. So the way objects work in Unity and Godot is different. Godot uses nodes for all the objects, whilst Unity uses game objects, which then you attach components to. In Unity, let's say for example you create a new empty game object. When adding the mesh and collision, it's all done via components. However, in Godot, the mesh and collision would be entirely separate objects because of how the node system works. I used to think it was kinda weird at first, but overall I've actually come to prefer the node system now. Some of you guys might actually prefer how game objects work in Unity, and that's totally fine, but for me personally, I really like Godot's node system and how everything is just separate objects on the hierarchy. With Unity game objects, all your components are within the inspector menu when you select an object. However, since Godot doesn't have components, and components are just nodes like every other object in Godot, the inspector menu is used for the properties of every node, including things that would traditionally be components in Unity, such as collision shapes and meshes. I think it's a nice way to separate things and keep things organized. The way nodes are organized is also a reason as to why I like Godot's UI, because I like the way Godot's UI is organized. I also really like how scenes work in Godot. So with Unity, when you make objects that you want to use for your scenes, what you'd most likely do is make a prefab out of it so you can instantiate the object if needed, or use it in other scenes. Scenes in Unity act as levels, and prefabs are game objects. Meanwhile in Godot, scenes are a lot more flexible in my opinion. So with scenes in Godot, not only are they used as levels, but they're also used like prefabs too. Scenes in Godot function just like how both scenes and prefab work in Unity. In Godot, when you want to create a new level, you just create a new scene. If you want to create an object for your level, just make another scene for that object. Then you can add that object scene into your level scenes. Overall, I do prefer the way scenes work in Godot, as they're very flexible and are used for both level and object creation. I think Godot's scene system would be easier to learn than Unity as well, because as I said, Unity has prefabs and scenes, and Godot just has scenes. Scenes in Godot are both used as scenes and prefabs. It's just easier to use an all-in-one solution, which in my opinion is more straightforward. Anyways guys, that there is the end of this video. If you did enjoy, be sure to like, comment and subscribe for more. There's a bunch more smaller reasons as to why I do prefer Godot over Unity, but I don't want this video to drag on for too long. Be sure to let me know in the comments below what your personal favourite game engine is, and if you are someone who uses both Unity and Godot, or at least if you've used them both at different times before, which one do you personally prefer? They both have their pros and cons. Unity is a great engine and so is Godot. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all again next time. Bye bye.